All right, welcome back to the channel. Danny Garcia has lost his mind. Thinks he's going to move up to 154 pounds and get in there with Jermell, Charlo, and the likes of those guys up there because he says he is now a natural 147 pounder and will eventually want to fight Keith Thurman and Shawn Porter and the champions at 154. Man, you nuts. Let's talk about that in this video. All right, welcome back to the channel. So, Danny Garcia, who is set as the mandatory challenger for the WBC title held by Errol Spence Jr., spoke about what his future plans were in boxing, and some of them were bananas, in my opinion. So, obviously, right now, he's in position to fight Errol Spence Jr. for the WBC title. He was the mandatory. The way that he got that was that he was actually a second mandatory for Keith Thurman. The WBC couldn't make up their mind as to who the mandatory for Keith Thurman was when Keith Thurman was, waffling in the hills in Nepal, smoking pipes and playing stringed instruments. What is that? Not a ukulele, the little one's a ukulele, whatever he's playing, out there in the Himalayas with his very beautiful wife. They decided, the WBC said, well, Shawn Porter's the mandatory. Oh, well, you took in a lot of time for this fight, so we'll give you a second mandatory. And that second mandatory is Danny Garcia. Now, Keith Thurman wound up never fighting the two, but Keith Thurman and so anyway, that's why I think that he became the mandatory again, because he was originally the second mandatory for Keith Thurman. But he did wind up fighting Danny Garcia for the championship, so maybe that went away and they just decided that they were going to give him another mandatory shot. You know how the WBC is, man. It's just some of their decisions don't make sense to me. But regardless, Danny Garcia is the mandatory for Errol Spence Jr., and they're supposed to be fighting next if Errol Spence Jr. doesn't take a tune-up first. But Danny Garcia is, so obviously there's a lot of interest in Danny Garcia. Danny Garcia is asked a question about what he wants to, who else he wants to fight. And he said that he's looking forward to rematches with Shawn Porter and Keith Thurman, but he wants those fights to be at 154 because he now believes that he is a big 147 pounder now. And so he feels like he could compete effectively at 154 pounds. If you recall, Danny Garcia came up from 140. He was at 140 for a while. Then he started having difficulties making weight at 140. So he fought some catch weights at 140 and then moved up, I think, I won't try to name which fights were. Maybe Mauricio Herrera and Rod Salka might have been catch weights. But somewhere around that time frame, he started taking catch weights. He moves up to 147, gets a piece of gets the WBC, wins the WBC vacant belt against Robert the Ghost Guerrero, and on and on and on and on. However, you would think that because he came from 140 pounds to 147, that, he's a natural, he might have been a natural 140, but what he's saying is, no, I have now grown into the weight. He said that he used to weigh in or used to walk around at like 155, somewhere around there, but now, he's walking around in his I think he said he's now walking around at like 160, 168. So feeling like he's coming back down to 147 will be a natural thing for him. Man, let me give you my point on that. No, absolutely, positively not. Danny Garcia, I don't care how big he is. If he gets in there and tries to take these guys at 154 pounds, dude is going to get washed. Because 154 pounds, he's having a hard enough time being a top guy at 147. And 154 is a completely different animal. Now, could he move up and fight Shawn Porter and Keith Thurman at 154 and have just as competitive fights? Yes, he could. Keith Thurman at 150, they would be the same guys. The same guys just fighting at a bigger weight class. And they're all roughly the same size. So it should just make it easier for those guys to make weight. However, can you compete with the guys at 154 pounds, like a Julian Williams or Jermell Charlo or Jarrett Hurd or Tony Harrison or Brian Castano, or I think that it would be very, very difficult for Danny Garcia to be successful with those guys. Like for example, and I'm not even going to name like the best 154 pounder, but a guy that's, I believe, is in the top 5 of the 154 pounders. That's Tony Harrison, right? Tony Harrison, a guy that has, has found a way to take a nap or two in the middle of fights, right? Once by Jermell Charlo, and once, I do believe, by Jermell Charlo, and once by Jarrett Hurd. I think Jarrett Hurd also stopped him. But that Tony Harrison, out of the great city of Detroit, great city of Detroit, Michigan, will absolutely positively dog walk Danny Garcia to a unanimous 12-round decision, and it won't be competitive. Wouldn't be competitive. He'll stick jabs from the outside, stick and move on the outside, stay away from Danny Garcia, and win that fight on a unanimous decision win. Jermell Charlo, I think any of those guys, with the exception of Jarrett Hurd, could walk into the ring with Danny Garcia, never put themselves at risk, and walk out with a decision without a doubt. And I don't even know if my man's vaunted left hook would, if it landed on some of those bigger guys, would have the same effect that it would on the guys that he was fighting, the guys that he's fighting previously. If you look at the people that Danny Garcia has fought, I'm not sure how many of these dudes were, that he's actually beat you would consider top welterweights, let alone the top 154 pounders. Danny Garcia, in my opinion, needs to stay down there in 147 pounds and figure a way, if he can get these rematches with Shawn Porter and Keith Thurman, and wait it out. Errol Spence Jr., first of all, a lot of these belts are going to come up missing in a minute, right? Well, the people that hold the belts are going to come up missing. Manny Pacquiao, who has the WBA, has 3 more fights in him tops. 3 more fights in him tops. Errol Spence Jr. has 3 fights. He has 4 fights at welterweight tops. Four fights at welterweight tops. Now, unfortunately, way boxing runs, 4 fights at welterweight division can be 2 years, but 4 fights tops. He'll have the Danny Garcia fight, which I believe he'll win, and I believe he'll win even if there's some lingering injury or something from his accident. I still think he's going to beat Danny Garcia, because what he needs to beat Danny Garcia is not his A game. Errol Spence Jr. can beat Danny Garcia with his B game. And by B game, I mean the one where he decides he's going to stand on the outside, pop you with jabs and straight left hands, and then move before you have a chance to get anything off against him. I believe that he can walk into a fight, treat Danny Garcia like it's a sparring session, win 12 straight rounds, just like he did with Mikey Garcia, and call it a day. And that's without him, and that's with him having some type of, I don't know what type of injury people are thinking he's going to pop up with that the doctors couldn't find ahead of time, right? Or wouldn't have been known to him in his sparring and the workouts that he was doing. I know that he has the issues with his mouth, so maybe, something about his teeth may not have been fully healed or something. But I suspect that with all of these fighters that had teeth knocked out and are walking around with veneers like Danny Garcia, that problem can be overcome. At least that's my thought on it, and we'll see, and we'll see it when it actually happens. But Danny Garcia, with the Errol Spence Jr. fight, should still have an opportunity to fight for another championship when Errol Spence Jr. is gone, because he's a big 147, and 154 really is an area that he's going to wind up at. I think that around the time that he moves up there, though, that a lot of the guys from 154 should be moving up. Jermell Charlo, I think, has a discipline to stay at 154 for a while. But if he gets past Jason Rosario, I could see him moving up to 160, especially if his brother Jermell Charlo, who was being ducked like it's going out of style at 160, moves up to 168 to fight, to chase David Benavidez, Caleb Plant, Billy Joe Saunders, and or Callum Smith, right after he gets done demolishing Chris Eubank in a fight that I definitely hope takes place. But, all in all, I appreciate what Danny Garcia is saying, but you're trying to move up there with Jermell Charlo and those guys at 154. That's just a bad look. And Danny Garcia is going to wind up being an asterisk in that weight class. Maybe he can pull off the WBO with Brian Castano. I mean, there's an outside chance of that, but even that, dude, I would take Brian Castano over Danny Garcia at 154 pounds as well. Anyway, it is what it is. You let me know what you think in the comment section. And with that, I'm out. Peace.